What I'm doing now is I'm actually forging in the tang. So this is actually going to be the part that the handle goes to. Here's the blade proper. Here's going to be the tang. Here's actually where the furrow and the handle rest against. So now what I'm doing is I'm actually going to cut it off so I can finish forging out the tang. We're upsetting it in the vise to localize that particular area we're working on. Which right now we're actually trying to get just a little more mass in the part that goes from the tang into the blade of the handle. So you can see where we've gained some thickness here and thickness here. Just getting in here and refining this geometry for where it makes a transition from the tang, or what will eventually be the handle, into the blade proper. So what I'm doing is I'm actually adding some borax. Borax is actually a flux used when we are welding or forge welding metals with the fire. A forge weld is actually a pressure weld, and in order for it to weld, the material has to be perfectly spotlessly clean so they can actually get a molecular bond. So here is the wrought iron body of this chisel that we're making, and here I have an old farrier's rasp that we're going to use for the hardened edge or the cutting edge of this soft wrought iron which cannot harden. So what I'm actually making is now I'm putting in the scarf. So I've already cut it nearly all the way through, and now this is actually the scarf. This back side, or the flat side, is the part that actually goes on, and the scarf is how the weld actually blends in. So wrought iron, we're making a wrought iron chisel, and so we're steeling the face of that, and the steel actually melts at our lower temperature. So when we're welding, we actually have to heat the two at two different temperatures in order to get them weld properly. And here we come. I'm just waiting for it to snap. The thing is, watch. See how the sparks are different? Now watch. See how they have more of a starburst to them? Mm-hmm. It's because that carbon is being pulled off. As it's being pulled off, it's actually catching fire and burning. So So what I'm doing now is I'm actually going to go just a little bit narrower than the finished size, because when I do the beveling on the back of it, it'll actually make it just a little bit wider. So what I'm doing now is actually called burnishing, and what I'm doing is the final forging heats. So this is where we're actually establishing the correct lines before we move on to the final finishing. And again, I'm going just slightly wider in the material, because when I file it, that's where we're going to... In most steels, actually are heat treated between 1350 and 1800 degrees. What I'm doing is just bring this below transformation temperature to actually help normalize it some. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it, I'm going to wire brush it one more time to clean the scale off, and then I'm going to take one more heat at that lower temperature and thermocycle it. So there is actually the heat giving off and taking up. Did you see the color change? Did you see that quickly? Yeah. So we're going to do one more thermocycle at about 1300 degrees, and then we'll just leave it on the side for a few seconds. The neat thing about the temperature is that it's all dependent on ambient light. So if you have a really bright shop, then you can't see the temperature as good, because it's a higher temperature will actually show a lower temperature of the metal. So in other words, the more light, the less hot it looks. So as you can see, it's just slightly bigger than that 3/4 of an inch mark. And that'll allow us to clean it up all the way. This is actually going to be the initial setting of how everything is going to look as far as symmetry and the overall lines for how it's going to be when it's done. In the olden days, they actually had gauges that were actually just a slot that you would actually take and just try to stick it through. And that made it so it could actually be built a lot faster. Skill. And being able to file really, really well and accurately is a basic skill set for a blacksmith. Especially if you're involved with trade blacksmithing, or you're involved in doing fine work, like if you are doing guns or rifle work or something along those lines, that you should be able to file flat, smooth, and true. And in the olden days, they actually had filing classes when you went and served your apprenticeship. So you would actually learn how to file and make it be an accurate, like a 1, 2, 3 block, which today, as we know, is 1 inch by 2 inches by 3 inches. So one of the ways you can actually see what's taking place when you're filing is if the lines go all the way across the piece. That means that you're actually holding it flat and true. If you notice that the lines stop, it means that you're not actually holding it flat and true, and then you can see how they continue again. It's really such a neat facet. So what I'm doing now is I'm doing the initial roughing out, or the initial line, setting of the lines, and then I'll come back in and do the final draw filing with a mill file, which will give it a nice finish. The hardest thing about chisels is because of how straight they are. And that really becomes we're having, extra help with flatters and all that kind of stuff really pays off. Probably one of the funniest thing about doing all this stuff is I love doing this kind of work, but it's time consuming. And so anytime that you look at doing something like this, it has to be more for the passion of it than actually doing it to make money. By the way, in the olden days, they actually had machines, big grinding belts that they would actually put these on, in the, grinding wheels that they would actually do a lot of the, once they became commercialized, that they would use to finish these. In small areas like we're in, they were, still doing some of this by hand, but not very much of it. Okay, so what I've just done is I've gone from a mill bastard, a half-round mill bastard, into just a mill file, which is a lot finer finish. The lines have been set on the chisel, so now I'm getting ready to set the final finish just before heat treatment. So what it is we've already cleaned the metal, and now we're actually getting ready for the hardening process. So right now I've made my fire bigger, and I'm actually taking the heat treating process. We're actually going to harden in this oil that I have sitting over here in this can. So I'm just bringing it up to temperature really slowly to get a good penetrating heat going all the way to the center of the high carbon steel. Once we're up to temperature, I'll come and plunge it in, and that'll give us our hardness we're looking for. And again, ideally we're looking for right around 1 inch in length of hardness. So we're not hardening the whole blade, just about an inch of it. What I've done is I've stuck it in the oil about that inch, and now I'm wiggling it back and forth. And as I wiggle it back and forth, it actually keeps the bubbles from creating a shrouding effect. So we can actually get it hardened and have most amount of liquid in contact with the steel. I am tempering. So we've already gone through the hardening process. So now what we're doing is we're modifying the hardness that we did. So usually when you harden something, you're going for the maximum hardness. So in other words, martensite is your maximum hardness. And what we're doing now is we're moderating that, or tempering it, to make it just a little bit softer, so it won't fracture because it's so brittle in that martensite stage. That is pretty darn good. Bob, what do you like, about 30 degrees? Yeah. This is actually an item that we just finished up in Bolton. This is actually a carving chisel made out of wrought iron and high carbon steel. It was forged completely from a 5/8 square bar of wrought iron and part of the rasp that actually has the cutting edge. So just finished it up, and we're just wrapping up this filming shoot.
It's cutting extremely well. We sharpened it with 400 grit, 1200 grit, 6000 ceramic, and it's literally razor sharp. And the real test is to be able to go into a piece of softwood, but like northern or eastern white pine, and have it cut very cleanly.